right, the Lake Mills Parks Board meeting of August 14th, 2024 is in session. It is now 5:33, and we welcome you for the evening. I will go through the agenda as part of the normal process and kind of explain what our intent is for tonight's special meeting. If anyone is wondering that's watching online or in the future as to why we're on a Wednesday instead of a Monday, it is because by state statute we could not meet before the election, which was yesterday. So going forward, we'll go back to our newly adopted Monday meeting, so be aware of that. So roll call. Michael, would you go first, please?
Sure. Mike Niesman.
McCray Baker.
Anita Martin.
Tim Sprecher.
Mary Schmager.
Thank you. And then guests and presenters. So,
If you guys would like to introduce yourself.
Erin Cox was on Sandiana.
Coleman Hutchinson, Jefferson County, and then Water.
Thank you. The question is, could you be heard? And I could hear you, but
Do you have your mics on?
Yeah. So just make sure you have the green button and you're approximately 6 inches away from the microphone.
Okay, thank you.
thanks for asking. So, first agenda item that we're going to go to is number 4 is Parks Board minutes and options. We have a couple to read and decide on. And then number 5 in the agenda is the Parks Board minutes. And we'll approve those, either the long version or the short version. Item number 6 is Parks and Forestry Director's report from Eric Schneider. And 7 is the finalized recommendation on next steps regarding fulfilling City Council Resolution 23-41A. So that will be subsets, will be review and discuss the update, the Mill Pond recommendations, and that's one of the reasons that we have our guests Aaron and Colton here, so that's part of 7. 8 will be public comments, including emails. 9, recommendations for future agendas, and 10 will be adjourned. So if there aren't any additions or changes to the agenda, we'll get into our Parks Board minutes options. So A is read the 2 options noting the desired amount of detail in the minutes. Hopefully we've all had a chance to do that. And B, decide which of the either the 2-page executive summaries or the standard 1-page that we as a Parks Board want, but also considering what is best for the city staff. So any questions on that? I want to thank Mike for giving us those 2 options.
Can I make a few comments?
You most certainly may.
Well, as you know, I spoke with Misty about this, our city clerk, and there is a competing needs. For the administration, brevity is excellent. I didn't realize that these had to be printed and stored, so I get why no one wants 15 pages. They also would like, the more you summarize what goes on, the more open you are to critique of editorializing, diminishing someone's input, or ignoring it altogether. And links can go obsolete, so I know that they didn't care to have those links in there. On the other hand, for the public, I know, and it was one of our community members spoke, that they found it much more efficient and preferred to read it rather than wading through the video, which is excellent, and there are bookmarks, but those bookmarks are somewhat general. And if you've tried, when I do the minutes from them, it's very difficult to move it just a little bit. You end up popping back and forth. So, it seemed to me there's, between administrative needs and the need to inform the community, that it was not unreasonable to go with a slimmed down. I didn't realize that Eric's Park Board comments or director's comments are already online, so those will need to be printed. And I just gave an example of how much this can be cut back. But I have no dog in this fight. I'm happy to do either one. It is up to the Parks Board as to what you wish to have.
I'll chime in. I think that I guess personally, I guess I like the shorter, more condensed version. And looking at this past month's meeting, there's the long version had, I guess, summary of discussion, and when that's getting written down, it kind of has to get interpreted. And if someone wants to see that, they still have the option of going online to look at exactly what was discussed. I think what we maybe could do as a compromise is just, I guess I haven't looked at the timestamps on the videos. Are they the same, like, chapter titles that we have here on this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. I guess it's, if someone is really trying to see what exactly is going on, they might just have to put in the time to listen to what was said. That's my opinion.
Anita?
Well, I clearly see the advantage of both. As a person who sometimes is not able to attend various meetings, I do like to have a little bit more information than the one page. So I would actually favor the 2-page executive summary.
All right, thank you. I will defer to after the discussion. So Mary, would you weigh in, please?
I think I am in the same place. I think there's a purpose for both sets of minutes, but I prefer the shortened version, and it is primarily because when we have a large discussion, and as I was reflecting on the longer minutes, I think there was a lot of really important commentary that was made by others that didn't get captured, or was captured in the video, but not necessarily brought forward. And so Mike, you have a very tough job to try to summarize them. And I think that puts you in a tough situation to choose the important pieces to boil it all down. And so I think I'm feeling as if there is an interest in a particular subject, actually hearing the discussion in full is the best way for citizens to really understand what's going on. I am because I'm a reading person. I like to read, and I would read to the summary and go, oh, I'd like to learn more, and then go out. And so it is a trade-off, but I do feel as if this captures a portion of some of the commentary, but not all of it, and I think that's the risk that we would be taking, and so I prefer the shorter version. I could support longer, if the committee voted in that regard.
My thought is echoed, I think, with McCray, thank you.
Wait a minute, he's not on the roll call.
Yeah, talking to, anyway. And that, I think for our risk of having the wrong thing, put in, and say words are important, that I think it would behoove us to, as McCray says, to timestamp them, so that if in there they can, and then the length of it maybe, so they can find it, but then they're hearing it first person, and there won't be the misconstruing. And then plus for ourselves, as we're reading the notes and the minutes, we might miss something even ourselves. The other thing I do want to make sure though is if we are having a discussion and we say, well, I don't think that's what was the topic, we aren't going to go back and look at those videos until maybe the next meeting. So that would be part of our process, and we'd have to say, well, we'll hold that, let's put it on the agenda for the next time, then we'd have to go back and look at it. But that said, I would agree that I think if this works better for the city and the staff, plus will help Mike with his time, that I would agree that I think the short is the way to go moving forward. So any other discussion?
Can I ask a question regarding Ms. D's preference on the short version? So I see it in our last minutes of July 8th, there was a lot of discussion. Did she give any recommendations regarding documenting just decisions or anything that is a little bit between the short version and the long, where her recommendation would be to, is discussion just right discussion, we just, and that's what we did, we discussed, but would she advise that we actually also just document key decisions or anything of that nature, or does she have?
Hers was actually, this is an expanded version of what she recommended.
Okay.
She wanted simply votes and, motion to go, and that was about it. It said
Okay.
discussion of August meeting, but it wasn't not to be expanded upon.
Okay.
So this one page is actually a little meatier
That
than
she even
what she
suggested.
was talking about.
Okay, thank you.
And, I should say the other advantage for her was she would like to have every commission/board follow the same outline.
Okay. Thanks.
And that was what she conveyed to me also, so I think in the spirit of working with our colleagues and such and consistency, I think that's why at this point I'm leaning to approving the shorter one-page process.
Do we need to vote on that, or will simply our accepting of one, the long and the short, be adequate for that?
I believe it would probably be best that we vote on approving someone proposing approving and using the shortened version that's approved by the council and preferred by the city clerk. Do I have a motion to,
I'll motion to approve the, going for the short version of notes.
and do we have a second?
I'll second.
So a vote, all in favor, aye.
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 All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you for the,
I abstain, just for the record, I abstain.
thank you for the clarification, Mike. So make note of that.
I shall.
Thank you, Mike. So moving a little bit backward into the agenda, we have a guest that arrived a bit after the introduction, so I apologize, I don't remember your name. Would you say who you are and what department or you are from?
Yeah, apologize. Spent an hour of my life that I'll never get back on the belt line today. So, I'm Arthur Watkinson with the Wisconsin DNR. I'm the Regional Lakes Coordinator or Lakes Biologist for the South Central Region, which is the southwest 11 counties in the state. In the water quality program, so main thing that I regulate is aquatic plant management, but I do provide feedback on water rate or water management specialist permits, potential dredging, as it relates to my program, so water quality.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you very much, all three of you, for being here. It's, and your roles here, we're going to ask questions, have some discussion, then you can give us your perspective and regulations if it's appropriate. So thank you for being here. So thank you, Arthur. Let's move back into the agenda. So we are at agenda item number 6. 5 was we approved the short version. So in 6, we are at the Parks and Forestry Director's report from Eric. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, Anita. We need to approve the short version of the said minutes, as the ones that we approved. So could we have any discussion on the short version as provided from Mr. Nessman? If none, I would have someone motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
I move to approve the short version of the minutes as printed.
And second that?
All right, so let's have a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So the approved minutes will be entered into the record. Thank you very much. So let's move, thank you, Anita, for that. Let's move to number 6, Parks and Forestry Director's Report. Eric, are you ready?
Absolutely, because we do have guests here, and moving on to the next agenda option, I'll keep this fairly brief, but I will touch base on a couple highlights within the director's report. I did have a question from Tim and Mike regarding an A-frame that's currently in the swim area of Bartles Beach. It is there because it is over an obstacle within the swim area, and that obstacle is in fact a 24-inch intake pipe going into the fish hatchery. So that obstacle, we want to make sure that no one stubs their toes within that swim area. However, that will be addressed in the off-season, and because it is in our fish hatchery infrastructure, we're going to be working collaboratively with them to get some form of material on top, just to make it safe again. So the A-frame is really just to notify swimmers that there is an obstacle. For forestry, we have begun early removal list work for our trees. The only reason is because we will have surgery on one of our staff members this off-season when we normally complete our removals. So we are periodically completing some tree removals just so we can get a jump on them while we will be losing that staff member in the off-season due to recovery. The last couple of weeks, we have had several beach closures and advisories. I do want to remind everybody that we are still on track. Well, we have had years where there have been substantial more closures than currently this year, but I think we have done a better job at public noticing of our beach closures and notifications. So we've been using both social media as well as our website. That is by design, so if we have any advisories or closures, we will continue to notify people of them as we get updated test results. Sandy Beach West has been fluctuating between advisory and closed. Currently, right now, I would recommend to check the city website on current water quality results, and the signage that is at the beaches is going to be as current, or the most current form of notification. What we have found at least is that all of our reasons for closures were positive E. coli tests. So whenever there is either an advisory notice or a closure notice on those test results, we will conduct daily resampling at our wastewater treatment plant until we get a clear test result of those beaches. Any questions regarding that topic? Because that's probably one of the main ones that I wanted to touch on, at least in parts currently. Yes?
Question? I had someone ask about E. coli testing at the public launch or public pier sites. I'm curious if that would be a possible improvement.
It could be. It could be. It would just basically come down onto staff involvement. And it's not my staff, so it'll be water treatment plant staff, so once we're completing the samples. So that's something that I can bring up with Brian as well to see if we'd be able to allocate some staff time and resources to do breaking down the sampling at the three public areas. Any other questions?
I have a, did you find any more oak wilt? You talked about the tree
We have
services
not.
question. No, no more oak.
We have no additional confirmed cases of oak wilt. However, we have not sent in any additional studies though either. So we haven't noticed any perceived oak wilt right now. If we do notice perceived oak wilt, we will sample or collect samples, but we have not seen or been reported of any noticed or potential oak wilt. Any other questions? Like I said, I'd like to keep it a little, yes.
I just have one other one. I noticed you had, in your report, mentioned regulation signage on Sandy Beach Road. What is the new signage? I took a drive and I wasn't sure what I should be looking for.
So that was specifically at the request of police department, as well as just general public safety with pedestrians as well as vehicle traffic. So there were multiple parking complaints and issues resulting from 4th of July weekend. So the signage that we have now has been repositioned. So there was existing parking regulations at or near Rotary Park. What we've done is we've just made them more easy to view. So Rotary Park is signed accordingly, so no trailers can park in Rotary Park parking lot. So with overflow boat parking, Rotary Park is not allowed to park boats and trailers. The other section would be basically from Aaron's Fishbowl to the entrance of Sandy Beach Road to Highway 89, where it is narrower. That is signed no parking now in addition. So that was no parking by default, just because of the width of the road, however, it is signed.
Thank you.
Yep. The other addition onto that as well is the Ferry Drive Bridge is signed no fishing for bridge. The pedestrian bridge is specifically there for design. That pedestrian bridge is for fishing off of. That is the designated pedestrian traffic bridge of which people are absolutely welcome to fish off of. We did have a couple of close calls with some summer school classes where the kids are fishing down there, and we just want to make sure the kids are safe and not fishing from the ferry track bridge.
I think you can leave electric fences to keep the kids off that bridge.
But hopefully this helps. I want to encourage people to fish from the pedestrian bridge, not from the boatway.
There's been an adult actually fishing from the bridge quite frequently. But then I saw the new signs, so hopefully they'll make a difference.
Good.
So could I ask a question, Eric?
Yes.
When you said a couple close calls, what happened?
Basically people getting in the way. There was no actual incident, so no one was injured, no one was harmed, there were no vehicle collisions. However, people driving on the road were concerned about how close some of these people were, and the police department was generally concerned about public safety as well. So especially with the amount of kids that were down there for summer school classes, there were some kids darting back and forth between the ferry drive bridge and people driving that ferry drive were actually concerned about it.
Oh, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Eric and the Facilities and Grounds report? There was a question, someone asked about the drafting for the public pier and replacement with floating piers. And they were concerned with the look and stability of the floating piers. Has there been anything on the website, or might we see some of the options for the,
I can provide you a representative pier or a similar option that we're pursuing right now that you can actually view from our existing one. So the closest private property owner to the Fremont Street Pier, this would be on the south side of the Fremont Street Pier. That pier, where he has his boat and lift, would be very similar style, so the same make of what we have. The reason that was chosen is it's not really intrusive, so it's not like the ones that are at the mill pond. They are, I think, attractive. They're not really intrusive to the actual scenery, and the nice thing is they're maintenance-free, and they are very easy to install and remove. And then I haven't seen, or at least I haven't heard of any ongoing major maintenance required of them, and it mostly comes down to ease of installation and longevity for the most part. The current piers that we have, I think, have extended their usable lifespan. These piers, from all accounts, have seemed to be, they're very sturdy.
I think this person's concern was aesthetics.
So if you do want an example, I wanted to make sure that they at least blend into the scenery as well. I don't want anything intrusive either, but if you would like something that's a representation, that south property owner next to the Fremont Street Pier would be not the exact same layout, but the same manufacturer of the pier that we're going to pursue. By design, I wrote that capital request not to be vendor specific either, so if there are other options that I would like to pursue, I would just have to do it as long as that budget item is approved to operate within the usable budget span of that, but it doesn't tie me down into a extremely specific make or model of here.
Thank you. The other comment that I had regarding the Sandy Beach restaurant, and I see under you say your architects are further developing the plans for the restaurant. The design, the person asked about the rendering that was in the Leader, what it was, a month ago, and their comment was they weren't impressed. And so when I asked them what they didn't like, and what they didn't like is they thought it looked new, for lack of a better, and they wanted it to look more nostalgic, the old, kind of the flavor of Lake Mills with the library and such.
Architecture is a hard thing to agree to disagree upon because it's very, very subjective. There are things that I wouldn't prefer in my aesthetic, but at the same time, we're looking to see what appeals to the vast majority of people as much as possible. I think Michelle Quadnell at the council meeting tour was proposed actually had a very, very nice comment regarding it, to where if people want a restaurant facility, maybe this is a new place to make memories at, and even though it is different, it can still be enjoyed. I think that was a very nice comment that she made. So it is one of those things too. Of course, there are things that I personally would not enjoy in my home. But at the same time, I would like to see that it appeals to as many people as possible, just based on the venue itself. So, short answer is I will not be able to please everyone on the actual design of it, but trying to provide the amenities to people at Sand Beach.
And this maybe could go to actually the city council, but the question was, that was also brought up to me, is how come the city owns a restaurant? And their comment was, why don't they just lease it for 25 years or 50 and have somebody else, the restaurateur, build it, rather than the city building it?
How the lease structure is defined is still in development currently. That lease will be basically ongoing and reviewed by city staff, and it's actually decided, but the actual leaser or restaurant operator will have a portion of fiscal responsibility of the restaurant itself, so it's not entirely an accrued city cost.
Thank you for the answers. And any other questions for Eric or comments for Eric regarding the director's report?
No, but can I make a comment about the citizen feedback that you have regarding or questioning why the city owns the building? I was not on the city council when the decision was made to start pursuing that, but I'm thinking of the scenario we have right across the street with the Century Building. And it's owned by a personal or a business. It's not owned by the city. So the city doesn't have any controls over what that particular property does or doesn't look like. And so Sandy Beach is a park that is very important to the city. It's one of the highlights on Rock Lake, and so I think there would be, I would think if I was on city council back in the day and thinking of the risks of having someone else put on a building and own it, and we just lease this space to be of possible high risk, because you don't then own, I mean, you can through contracts and whatnot, put together parameters by which you can govern some of that, but it gives you an element of someone else making the decision on how to manage that property. And so it's just a perspective that I have regarding, I think, of the Century Building, and, love to see something there if the city doesn't have the ability to, maybe we can influence and guide, that maybe we can't force or personally do something without taking on that property ourselves as a city. So I just look at it that way. It's not necessarily ideal, but it does provide us a place where there's less risk. So maybe that person would find a little more comfort thinking that way.
I think that, I think part of this came from the discussion last time about the amount of costs that the city is looking to undertake in the next few years, and that was one where, can we get somebody else to pay for it? So I don't know if that was it was just one of their suggestions, because they were quite concerned about what they perceived as a lot of the outlays from the city at this point. So thank you for the insight. Anyone else comments on the report? If not, then moving to item number 7, finalize recommendation on next steps regarding fulfilling the city council resolution. And if I may, I would like to just read one part of this, because I was pondering this after our last discussion. And this goes into the resolution and into the second, actually, main part. Says, now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Lake Mills as follows. Section 1's Parks Board referral. The City Council hereby assigns the Parks Board to review the potential short-term and long-term maintenance needs of the mill pond that facilitates, and this I think is important, this resource's best and highest use to meet the needs of the community. So I bring that up because I know the discussion last time is, can we just make it a park or a body of water that's used for it's like silent sports and such. And not that I'm against it, I like canoeing and kayaking and not skilled enough to paddleboard, but the issue comes back to the best and highest use. So if we consider the highest use, then I think we have to consider access to motorboats and to other watercraft. So I just wanted to bring us back to that as one of our charges.
There's a comment or something that was noted in the one version of the notes from last month's meeting that if we're going to go to that version, I was going to discuss, but we approved it short, but I still think warrants discussion. I think it was mentioned that an environmental impacts statement was necessary, and I guess I don't see that anywhere in the resolution here. It is mentioned that we need to consider the environmental impacts, but I don't think we need a formal, I guess this resolution is, unless I'm missing it somewhere, it does not say we need to have a formal environmental impact statement.
That was a city council meeting prior to our last Parks Board meeting. It was brought forward by Greg Waters and supported by the city council that we have an environmental impact report as a part of our final recommendation.
Okay.
So it was, and I don't know if that needs a formal resolution. We don't have Dave Drescher here to tell us about the formality of how it moves from the city council down to this committee. But I was present, and Greg did put that forward as a requirement, expected requirement for a final resolution, a final recommendation. And so if I need to button that up with city council on whether this gets amended or whatever, I would be happy to look into that, because I'm not sure how that works.
Okay, because I think that maybe something worth clarifying, because I believe that like an official environmental impact statement is a extensive report, and my understanding is that's not what we're looking for here. We're looking to summarize the environmental impacts of whatever work we end up recommending. I guess I don't think, obviously I wasn't there, but I don't think an official environmental impact statement is what was intended there. So that could be something for clarification.
Okay, I'll take that.
And Craig, I wonder if that's something that we might ask our guests about, if they know, as far as the process for permitting environmental studies and in the past. And Eric, I am going to mention the note that I had, I believe it was in your report or online, about, this is dated April 24th, 2023, so a year and almost a half, but it's regarding the permit to remove materials from the bed of the channel between Rock Lake and the Mill Pond in the city of Lakeville. So that's actually from the Mill Pond to Rock Lake.
Yeah, so that was the existing dredging project, that's from Rock Lake proper to Ferry Drive. That has been completed, that's basically just our approved permit letter that came from Weston Matthews.
And so this letter, though, would that be something that you could speak to or our guests could speak to as to, would that be a similar process and similar stuff if we were, whatever we approve or would recommend, I should say?
Yeah, I can provide some background. So the channel dredging required an individual permit. There's different permits within the DNR, perhaps you guys can go into more detail as well. There's a general permit, there's an individual permit. An individual permit is what was required of that channel dredging. Any work that we do in a mill pond will more than likely by default require an individual permit. I can say that with basically absolute certainty that we would require an individual permit. Within the individual permits, there's a checklist of requirements that need to be met in order for this permit to be fulfilled. What you have there, that letter from Weston Matthews, think of it basically like a building permit. You have to post a building permit when you're doing anything in your home, so you have to abide by the ordinances. Posting that permit letter saying this is the work that's being completed, it is approved by the DNR, they have applied and been awarded a permit to complete the work as per those parameters. So that would be an example of an approved individual permit.
I see Erin nodding her head in affirmation. Anything else to add, Erin?
Yes, please. So the letter that you're referencing, I guess I can say that I am the new Wes Matthews, if you want to think of me that way. So Arthur talked about what his role is within DNR. I didn't really speak to that when I introduced myself, so I apologize. I'm a water management specialist, just like what Wes Matthews was. I currently cover Jefferson and Washington counties, so essentially what that means is that if you guys were to submit that individual permit application, I am the person who receives that, I'm the person who reviews that, and ultimately you would receive a letter like that one that you have there, but with my signature on it. I would agree with everything that Eric stated about, it's very highly likely that whatever you put forth as a proposal is going to involve an individual permit. That's not a bad thing. General permits, they are easier, faster, and cheaper to obtain, but just because this is bumped into an IP realm, that doesn't make it a bad project by any means. It just means that you're proposing something that might need, I guess, a little bit more environmental review on our end, but by no means does that make it a bad project. So.
And I apologize, you said IP realm?
Yes, I'm sorry, individual permit.
Okay. I'm not good at acronyms, so thank you. Any other questions for our guests, or just on your own?
Are you folks going to give us a little presentation, or do we need to do individual?
There's not going to be a presentation tonight, so basically, we have our options before us and some of the things that were discussed at the last Parks Board meeting, what our current options are, what has been discussed thus far. You guys have narrowed it down a little bit and eliminated some of those previously discussed options. So what we have here is basically a consultation panel, if you will. If you have supplemental questions to further define or create your recommendation, this is why we have our DNR and Jefferson County representatives here tonight to answer more specific or provide more specific input to some of your questions. So they are here as advisory consultants, I suppose you could say.
This is a question to Arthur and the other experts on our guests, in that, were you part of the, I think it's called Spring Creek channel in Shorewood / Madison, Wisconsin? I was reading about they had some dredging in Spring Harbor or such. Are you familiar with that project?
Was this part of the Suck the Muck project for the by Dane County to reduce nutrient loading into the Yahara system?
It may have been. And what's prompting my question is it's because it sounds like they had debris in there, or what are we calling it, where it's sediment?
Legacy sediment. So that was a long-term study I was not part of, but my supervisor, Mike Sargi, before he was a supervisor, that was a multi-year project where they saw, they documented that there was a significant amount of legacy sediment. It was releasing dissolved reactive phosphorus during the summer months. So it was then a priority for Dane County to remove the sediment to reduce the nutrient loading that was happening over those warm southern months, when that sediment at the water sediment interface would become anoxic and release that nutrient into the water and basically be food for algae to grow. And Dane County, that was, I would assume, an individual permit. I don't know offhand, but it was a county project permitted through the department. I'm not intimate with that specific project, but that's kind of my background on it.
Thank you, Arthur. And this, then I'm going to go to Colton and Aaron, but Colton, in your expertise in the time you've been here, would that be something that is at risk of happening in the mill pond as far as the nutrients being released, if something isn't done to the mill pond?
I mean, yes, there's always the chance of some sediment nutrients being released through the sediment. I mean, if you keep kind of like the motor and weights at a minimum, you wouldn't be disturbing a lot of that sediment. It's when you're really making it weight or something, disturbing the sediment, that you might have issues. But I don't know if I can add to that.
Yeah, I think where those are inlet streams to the Yahara chain, and they were a priority as part of their Yahara winds and other projects to reduce nutrients into the system. So the location of the mill pond by the outlet I don't think it creates that big of a need for the cost and for the phosphorus reduction that would provide to Rock Lake, and it'd be a significant cost. There's also the added impact of it's a sensitive area, right? It's a designated sensitive area. I don't see a need, they're not analogous, I guess is where I'm going with it. And you're gonna have some redistribution of sediment. Beaver Dam Lake, for example, in Dodge County's got a tremendous amount of legacy sediment ever since the dam went in. So you can, if you go on our website and look at the plots of data, you can see in the summer months, you get a huge pulse of total phosphorus, and that's very indicative of a similar thing on a lake-wide scale. There's not anything like that on Rock Lake, not nearly to that level, so.
Can I ask a question? Recapitulate, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I thought Colton had said, I'd be interested in all of your input, including his. We had been speaking about dredging another channel near the shore, all the way around the mill pond, to enhance shore fishing and to give people more access for that. My understanding from Colton was that, in fact, it probably wouldn't work. You need to stay at least 3 feet away, and then there was concern about invasive species, i.e. the Asian, milfoil coming in and getting so thick that literally larger fish can't get through. Wondering, and that kind of stopped me in my tracks because I was all ready to go with that circular route. I'm just interested in the panel's opinion, and Colton, am I paraphrasing correctly?
Yeah, that sounds about correct.
I'll add, it sounds like you discussed that last week. So, your Asian water milfoil, it's in over 700 lakes in the state. It's not the end of the world. On most lakes, it doesn't become a navigational nuisance problem. At this point, you already have a material obstruction in navigation caused by whitewater and spatterdock lilies. Spatterdock being the one with the yellow flower that looks like a buttercup, and the whitewater lily, the round ones that creates that showy white flower. I did kayak around today when we were grabbing water quality samples, and I kayaked the perimeter of the mill pond. The majority of it is already 3 to 4 feet plus deep.
I'm sorry, 3 to 4 feet, what?
Oh, depth, foot of water, yes,
Okay.
to the sediment
Okay.
in the area. The northwest corner has depth issues. Once you get to about the 3rd pier on the northwest end, it drops down to about 2 feet of water. Mechanical harvesting requires at minimum 3 feet of water, unless you get a smaller harvester that drafts 9 to 11 inches. There's not very many of those in the state. There's not many companies that provide that service. I only know of one off the top of my head. That being said, there's not very many instances of desirable floating leaf vegetation. It's ecologically speaking, very desirable. It is causing a navigational impact. I believe that's a fishing pier close to the dam. It's impeding that recreational aspect for shore anglers. I do believe it is an option in this instance to have a small navigational channel. However, along Colton's line, there's a frequency of occurrence. So on these little dots in the middle of the channel here, there's Eurasian water milfoil present in multiple locations. I don't know the exact number of the frequency of occurrence, so if there's 60 points, it might be in 10 or 15 of them already. That's an unknown of what's going to happen. Say that you harvest a 15-foot lane to open shore fishing and to open navigation for those 10 riparians or 11 riparians on the north end. It would be a positive for navigation. It'd be a negative ecologically. There'd be increased boating traffic, which is a good thing and a bad thing. You're going to get more sediment dispersal through the rock dropping motors. That's gonna redistribute sediment, which carries nutrients that are water soluble. So there's not very much algae in that mill pond right now.
Just one interruption here. Are you delineating dredging from harvesting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're talking about harvesting.
Both actions have very similar consequences in this instance. So when voting, the floating leaf vegetation, the whitewater and spattered dock lily pads, cover the surface and they block sunlight from other plants, other submerged aquatic vegetation, weeds from getting sunlight so they don't grow. If you take away that mat that's on the top of the surface, sunlight will get down there and plants will grow. What plants do grow in highly disturbed environments, it'll be your bladderworts and your Asian water milfoil most likely. So you'd be opening a niche for those plants to potentially take that area. Now, I don't know if it's gonna necessarily top out and mat out and be 100% thick with your Asian water milfoil. I don't see that very often in high water quality areas. That's mostly in your highly eutrophic or very nutrient rich systems that happens. But it's definitely a possibility, and it'd be something that would be taken into account.
So that area that we already dredged early this year, looks like it's got a, I don't know, big estimate, 40 to 50% filled in with some vegetation of some sort. And we just did that this winter. Is that healthy or unhealthy, or is that invasive or non-invasive? So I like to look at things in terms of like a pilot, and to me, dredging that is a mini pilot. We dredged it, it was fresh, it was clean, and now we're sitting, well, it's been growing in there, but it's pretty full with vegetation right now, almost fully across, and it's almost all the entire length. So thoughts on, like, what are we seeing there, and is that an indicator of what we might see should we, or if we dredge or harvest in the rest of the mill pond or portion thereof?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's an unknown, right? But I think that's pretty indicative of what could potentially happen. We saw different plants in that channel that were not water lilies. So submerged aquatic vegetation, SAV. So that's definitely a possibility, and that's probably a reasonable guesstimate of what could happen, but that's an unknown. It could all be taken over by Asian water milfoil, and I don't think it would grow to dense mats, but it's a possibility, and I would say it'd be more likely to be indicative of that channel that's present currently. And in the majority of those areas, it's reasonably similar depth. It might not look like it because it's covered with water lilies, but I went out with a pole and checked, and it's reasonably similar depth to those areas already. So it might not be worth to dredge the majority of that area. Now, on that west end, from basically those three western piers to the north down, that's got less depth. And it also has, the only spot in the mill pond that I saw from the whole north, we'll call it the north U, that had it's called Cara, it's a muskgrass. It's a macroalgae that kind of layers the bottom and protects it from disturbance. It's the only area in the pond on that north end that had it. Whether that's depth related, I can't really say, or if there's a spring there that pops up. It tends to like spring water for whatever reason. But that's, where was I going with that?
So those three are, they have a, so it's less depth, and then what else about them that's good or bad? I mean,
There's a desirable macroalgae, so it's a big stringy algae that covers the bottom there. the main issue with any harvesting would be disruption of that desirable habitat. Or people call it perch grass too, if that's a familiar thing. So it's great habitat for invertebrates. Young of the year fish can hide in it. They call it perch grass for a reason, and or sand grass.
One of the things that I would like to mention as well, I know at last meeting, we had recently brought up the validity, or at least the option to pursue weed harvesting or weed cutting in lieu of dredging. So I began my research and I found the same thing that Arthur was mentioning. Out of all the local businesses, at least in this portion of the state, they require a minimum, basically a minimum amount of water to actually run their equipment. The mill pond would not have qualified for them to actually be able to operate their equipment. So I was not even able to actually achieve a price quote or price estimate on what it would cost to weed harvest, just because they're not able to operate their equipment on it.
Thank you for the information. I have a couple of questions, Arthur, and I thank you for being out there and doing your survey. In your experience today, where would you say that, if I'm hearing you, in the northwest corner, by Ferry Drive and where the Water Street would be, that how much of that is 2 feet or less in that? How far do you have to go out from the pure shoreline before you get into navigable, whatever water would be?
Yeah, the third pier on the north, and there's this little point that sticks out. Colton put together this map that has all the depths on it. Now, this year it might be doable, right? We've got the water. Last year, this would have been a hard no-go. All this being said, harvesting water lilies is generally not permitted in the state, especially in sensitive areas. But I think with the public fishing pier there, I definitely would consider it on a case-by-case basis here, with the caveat that I'll probably have to think about it a little more, and you would require being at full maximum pool like you are right now. That's full summer pool. So last year, this would have not even been a consideration.
So thank you for thinking. Thinking is always good. And so what I'm asking at this point is because in this time we've been working on this, the people that own property on the mill pond, some of them have commented they are not able to use their piers to access the lake. Now, what I'm hearing from you is if the depth is 3 feet, but they are able to access the lake from their ponds, except for 3 piers. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, the 3 piers on the northwest corner are 2 feet. I mean, you'd be able to get a john boat in there or kayak pretty easily. The impediment is the aquatic vegetation, or the floating leaf vegetation. And you can see a case example is kind of that house that parallels with the boat launch directly to the north of the boat launch there. There's a clear channel where they're boating through it regularly and keeping it open. And there's adequate depth there.
So that's the northeast part of the
North central, northeast, yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you, if my understanding, the DNR, a person that owns a pier, they are able to take their pier out to navigable water. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the only ones that have an issue at this point are the 3 on the northwest.
So I think the pier to navigable water is a little bit different. So they could extend their pier, but they'd still likely be in a similar depth on that northwest corner. They could, and it's also in a sensitive area, so the exemptions for piers might not necessarily apply to those folks. You're never going to get a big giant 27-foot boat in that northwest corner and not be changing your impeller once a week on your boat. That's just not what the mill pond is. Plain and simple for those folks. I'm surprised that they can even get those two boats on the central northeast corner through the channel. And maybe they can't now that the water's a little higher, maybe they wanted the water a little lower, I don't know. But that was kind of surprising to me, so.
That's one thing that I can comment on is before we hit basically our summer maximum, the amount of traffic or motorboat traffic in the mill pond greatly increased because we had the channel dredged. Now it has since kind of tapered off and decreased a little bit, that we're at summer maximum, because people can't actually get those large watercraft through the ferry track bridge. So I can say that would potentially be a concern. So that's not
Can you
really
repeat
mill pond
that?
itself.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry, Mike. Can you hear me now better?
Yes.
Perhaps it was Mike. So this is kind of like some of the statements that I made previous in the season. Now that we're at summer maximums, the amount of watercraft or the height of watercraft that can access Rock Lake from the mill pond has decreased. The higher the lake level, the smaller the boat you have to take underneath Ferry Drive.
And just to confirm, did you say that the depth in the channel between the lake and the bridge that was recently dredged has now filled in again, basically goes back to 3 feet from what it had been?
No, the dredge distance, or the dredge depth was 4 foot. 4 foot was the perceived, or actual, our target depth for dredging.
And what is it now? Yeah, I thought you said 3, no?
I was talking on the north end.
Okay, sorry.
of the mill pond.
Okay.
And that ranged from 3 to 4 feet. And I think 1 or 2 were even deeper than that.
So the channel that we dredged this past spring has not materially decreased in depth?
I mean, not visually on my end, no, but it sounds like it hasn't filled in any noticeable amount. I don't know if you guys actually surveyed the channel itself, but I haven't seen any visual cues of it filling in at all.
It just says vegetation, so vegetation's filled in, but.
Yeah,
The depth needs to be the
exactly.
same.
Not depth, okay.
Can I jump in there?
Absolutely.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to jump in on the 3 foot of water depth conversation. That is, my program regulates pier placement in the state of Wisconsin, and that is the exemption standard. That is the standard that most boats need 3 foot of water depth in order to be able to navigate at a minimum. I mean, all due respect, obviously, to all landowners that, own property within the mill pond, but I guess I'll just comment that rarely do I see cities sort of dredging in order to help private landowners with their private problems. I mean, if it works out that way, wonderful. But typically, I see landowners having to kind of deal with that navigational issue themselves. If this is an instance where it can be handled, we're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone, that's wonderful. But yeah, I guess if I could, would it be helpful if I speak to what the process is for dredging permits? Just in a high-level way, so that you guys know kind of where I would be coming from if I were to review that application?
I would say yes, but may I just do a quick check with our park board colleagues and I'm just projecting here from our last conversation, what Arthur has said, what Colton has said, and what Patricia has said. I think at this point, as long as the mill pond can be used, and if it's got all sorts of beautiful water lilies on it, and people get through it, I don't think that we are beholden to dredging. I think we as a group would like it to make it a healthy, usable body of water. If we can get it where people have access from the boat launch over by the mobile station, the fire station, to the bridge. And if I'm hearing that almost all of the mill pond is at least 3 to 4 feet deep, you'd have to use hula poppers or something like that over the thing if you want to fish there. But to me, I don't think that dredging is our preferred option. That's just from what I've heard, and that's kind of what I'm, just make that comment. So I'm just going to ask the others on the board, if do we want Aaron to give us more detail on the dredging, or?
And I'll pass around this sheet of paper that Colton made. It has the water depths on July 10th. Obviously, the water might be a little higher as well.
And also with that, Colton, Aaron, and Arthur, right now we've had a lot of rain. And then I know we've had some discussions, you raised the water level of the lake now, right? Are we gonna raise it a little earlier, or that's our discussion in the past?
No, so we're still within the same water level order from the state. What has changed in 2024 versus 2023 is where the city regulates that dam within the water level order. This year, what has changed is we're holding at the allowed seasonal maximum. We've been holding at the seasonal maximum throughout the sustained portion of the season. Of course, that fluctuates up and down with precipitation, but it's been very close to the seasonal maximum fairly steadily throughout this whole season.
Thank you. Any comments, Anita?
Could I just ask a question? I think last time there was discussion that Colton was going to be doing a survey of invasives and stuff. Is that pretty much what was accomplished recently, or was that a separate situation?
Yeah, we were out in mid-July, did like a point intercept survey called PI surveys, and it's just like an aquatic plant survey. For the case of the mill pond, it was 103 points that were there, and you can note that on the map too. That's each point of the 103. So those ones that are white, those are spots where it was either non-navigable or there was like cattails and swamp loosestrife growing, so we didn't take an actual sample there. And then all the other points were ones where we actually collected aquatic plants and noted any type of species, obviously the depth and the type of sediment at the bottom. For the most part, it was mostly a mucky bottom for most of them. There was a few sandy spots, kind of like obviously closer towards the boat launch, and even rocky spots right near the boat launch. There's a lot of cobble and stuff there. And then we were talking about Eurasian. It was about between 30 and 40% frequency, so about 30 or 40 of the points had some amount of Eurasian water milfoil. It wasn't like it was surface madden or completely dense of just milfoil. It was kind of intertwined with a lot of like the whitewater lily, the bladderworts, duckweed and stuff, which also grows on the surface of the water. And then in total, so we did 94 total points where we actually got plants and stuff. And from that, we had a total of 25 different species within the mill pond. So that is actually a great number of plants to have. It's a very quality, floristic quality index. It ranks fairly high. And it was actually 2 more plants than what we found in 2022. So there's definitely a good diversity of plants. Of like those plants, the 7 major ones, obviously the whitewater lily, large and small duckweeds, which are just like really small little leaves just kind of floating on the surface. Coontail, Eurasian water milfoil obviously, and then the Cara that Arthur was talking about earlier, kind of that macroalgae that covers the bottom in some areas, and then also the common firework, which is one that's kind of found in areas where there's a lot of lily pads and then some sediments and stuff as well. And then all those other plants were kind of a lot lower in abundance, but they were definitely still there. There's a few spots here and there. So found the most kind of in that open-end area of the channel, and then kind of around like the boat launch to a degree, and then they were kind of intertwined in other areas, like your water marigold and water stargrass. So.
Did you see any change in percent between native, invasive from prior surveys? So are we healthy? Because you talk about different species, but are the species, are the percent of the natives and the good things outweighing those that are invasive and we'd say are troublemakers?
Yeah, there was a slight decline in the amount of Eurasian water milfoil and a slight increase in like whitewater lily, duckweeds, bladderwort. So that's definitely something good to see, that it's not like the Eurasians in there and it's slowly taken over all the natives. The natives are kind of holding their ground and even creating a few more species that are able to come in over time. So it's definitely something good to see.
Thank you, Colton. Thank you for the question, Mary and Anita. Colton, for my need, when it's very helpful when you tell us which are the invasives, the milfoils and such, so that it's good to hear their decline. So then, when you're commenting about the natives, like the lilies and such, I mean, I think that's what we want to increase or at least keep. And so I think the other thing for our question is, what if there is a risk, if we do cutting, there's a risk that might alter or open it up to invasives. If also dredging might open it up to invasives. Is there any scenario where any of these two things are going to help with the natives and better aquatic vegetation?
I mean, I also noted like what we saw in the channel too. I like kind of just walked around like the channel itself and noted about 13 different species, including 2 invasives being curly pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil. They didn't make up like complete majority of it. I mean, there was definitely still species present, and it was pretty much all the species that we already saw in the mill pond that are just in the channel as well. But I mean, it's kind of like an unknown, like Arthur was saying, like you're in a disturbed area. It's really an unknown what's exactly going to take over there, but by science and kind of knowledge from past surveys and being out on areas, you're obviously going to expect at least, or would presume that Eurasian water milfoil or bladderworts would take over those areas first, just because they like those disturbed areas. But it's really an unknown until it were to happen. So,
Can I just sort of a little bit? If I understood you guys correctly, harvesting / cutting is not an option in the mill pond. There are no companies in the south that will do it, apparently. Is that right?
It would be an option, I think.
It would be an option?
If there's adequate depth. Now, it could have negative consequences.
No, but I just mean, it isn't even an option. I thought that Eric had said there is no company in southern Wisconsin he's aware of that would actually be able to do the cutting / mowing.
It would be difficult. So there's very limited companies and contractors that are able to do it based on the style and type of equipment that they have. I think Arthur would be able to better speak on that.
So I'm not sure
experience of some of the
consider
contractors.
that a lot. And the second thing is, you're saying there's already enough depth of water. It has to do with the weeds, and so dredging may not affect that. So I guess I'm short-circuiting here. I'm not sure what our options are then.
If I may, I know one of the things that I wanted was the potential cost of weed cutting and harvesting. That's one of the unknowns that we also have. And I was just not able to achieve that answer because I didn't have a viable contractor to provide me that cost because they couldn't operate their equipment within the mill pond. So that's why I wasn't able to provide those cost estimates.
I guess am I right on that? It's basically, practically speaking, cutting / harvesting is pretty much off the table at this time. And second, dredging, we're not sure the point of that if we have enough depth anyway. So it's a problem of excessive growth of good plants that are cutting it and a matter of keeping it open. I just want to I get confused sometimes easily.
There's limited contractors, and they're busy in the summer, obviously.
And they're
Then there's limited contractors, they're busy in the summer. They generally run $2,500 a day, roughly, maybe $3,000 now. That includes a mobilization fee and the actual harvesting. I guess where I'm coming from is this is not a new issue. I mean, you can see on Google Earth, this has been what the mill pond has been for the last decade, maybe more. There's adequate depth. I would not foot the bill for dredging if I was the city council. And in general, there's not a lot of, similar to the whole dredging costs, there's not a whole lot of cities that pay for individual riparians. I think this is kind of a unique case because you have that fishing pier that might not be getting the utilization. There's risks associated with it. It'd be something that maybe the fisheries biologist might want to comment on if it would open up. I doubt he's going to say there's density-dependent growth for large fish that they're stunting bluegills because there's the entire main lake where that's not the case. So I don't think that would be a reason to. Sometimes when you have so much vegetation packed in, there's so many hiding spots for the little fish to hide and not enough opportunity and ambush points for large predator fish to ambush those fish, and then you get stunted populations of fish. I don't see that being an issue on the mill pond. They have the entire lake. What I do know about the mill pond is it is a tremendous nursery for frogs. You can go out there and count till the cows come home. There's thousands and thousands of tadpoles in there right now. There's a wood duck making with their 9 chicks using the mill pond right now. There's a significant amount of young of the year fish using it right now. Young of the year, so, and up to a little bit larger. I mean, it's tough to see any big giant bass that are sitting under those pads, but I would assume there are if there's forage like those tadpoles. There's frogs and snakes using the mill pond. It is a tremendous resource ecologically. I think any type of mechanical dredging, I can't recommend any contractors. I don't know the contractor's availability. That's not the role of the state. The role of the state is to permit any type of harvesting that would happen. I would say you're lucky in the fact that Jefferson County is so active in getting these aquatic plant surveys completed. That's a big ask normally. That's probably 100 points. That's probably $3-4 grand saved for the city council just on that. It opens you up for a potential 5-year permit. I would, on a very limited scale, to open access to the fishing pier in particular. I think that would be something that I'm open to and partial to as a state employee. And on a very limited, as soon as you cut a channel that maybe it's 10 feet wide to provide access for those riparians, that's something I'm open to. You're never going to get me to sign off on skimming and cutting all those, and I don't think that's what the city council wants either. So if a harvester contractor can be accrued, we can talk about the details of that as it relates to the mill pond. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Mary?
Can I ask a question about your perspective on adding like pier footings? If we wanted to do additional fishing piers, as an example, something, we've got the channel that's clear because we have the boats are coming through to go to the lake, and so that's an open place, and that's why people like fishing from the bridge, although we have new signs, so they can't fish from the bridge. But what is your, well, from the street, over the bridge. What is your perspective on if we were to, because I'm going back to the words that Tim, I super appreciate talking about the best and highest use, increasing fishing utilization. So how do you add more of that? And so if we were to think about how we could put in, I called it a boardwalk early on, we were brainstorming boardwalk or additional fishing piers, which would be footings in the mill pond. What is your perspective and support on doing something that would require that kind of impact, if you will, to the floor of the mill pond?
I think unfortunately Mark's not here, our fisheries technician. In general, that's gonna block, this is kind of a rookery or breeding area for centrarchid fish or bass and bluegills. Anytime you put an impervious surface over it, they're not going to use it. They might use it to bump up to, but you're taking away surface area for those fish species. And Mark would be able to more efficiently answer that. I think you would echo what I said though. It's difficult in a sensitive area to get that type of stuff permitted. I'm not sure your square footage, you might be under it. I'm also very partial to providing shore access fishing for the public. I think that's a really important thing, especially, kids using it. Now there's a safety issue. From a water quality standpoint, I don't think it would, depending on the scale, I don't think it would significantly impact the water quality depending on the scale of the piers in the project. I'd be open to a recreational fishing pier addition. I think another option for these individual localized areas would be, diver-assisted suction harvesting that can provide, or hand pulling as a riparian, you're allowed 30 feet, so if the parks wants to send somebody out there with a cutter to pull 30 feet, that's an option that can provide access to that fishing pier. I know there's at least one riparian on this northeast corner that did go through the permitting process through me for a hand pulling permit. That is the only person on the mill pond that has done that. And there are contractors that can do that. I don't know if it was to pull for fishing for access for that riparian, or if it was a spot to put his kayak in, or her kayak in. But that is an option for riparians as well. They can contract out for diver-assisted suction harvesting, or they can get a permit through me for hand removal in certain spots. It is a sensitive area, so they do have to get a permit to hand pull vegetation in this area. But that is definitely an option as well. And I don't see much of any depth issues, save that northwest corner that they don't have boats. And I don't know if they have a boardwalk that goes from there. I mean, you couldn't see it over the cattails. So I'm not sure what their access is there. Looks like they can get to it from shore from the aerial, but
I think, Arthur and Aaron, I'm going back to, at this point, our charge is to come up with potential short-term and long-term maintenance needs. From what I'm seeing on this map and what I'm hearing from you is that right now, from the boat launch to the bridge, the one that you can not fish off of, and the pedestrian one, which you can fish off of, it is a depth from 3.5, 3.33, 3.35, all the way to the channel. Is that correct? So where will it be in your projection if we get another drought? And will it still be at a depth that people can get their boats, kayaks, canoes, and such through?
Maybe I can speak on this a little bit, just because I'm more familiar with the daily water levels that we have had in the past. I would say, looking at 2023 drought conditions, I would say that channel was borderline navigable, but the rest of the mill pond, I would say no. But it all depends on precipitation and our actual water levels. So if we're at our minimum water levels, navigability will be impacted and impaired, but I don't know if it will be completely shut off. I know 2 feet of water is about as minimum as you can really get a motorboat through realistically. And last year we did have up to that amount of fluctuation, so it could be an option to still navigate from the mill pond boat launch to Rock Lake proper through the channel. But again, it's hard to predict based on precipitations.
So where I'm going with this in my projection is short term, I'm saying let's let it be what it is. And if it gets to the point where it gets real shallow, then we can maybe revisit a channel from the launch to the channel of whatever depth, whatever's proper. But at this point, I find very little need to be dredging or cutting or anything, given that we have a access to the lake underneath the bridges and from the boat launch to there. And then it sounds like everybody else except for the two or three piers that are on the northwest corner have access to the water and to the lake. Am I understanding that? I'm talking short term, right now, that's what it is.
Coming from my stance, like if my department is gonna be seeing the general oversight or maintenance and management of the mill pond, I would agree. The next thing that I also see is we now have the data to provide a baseline. If again, we conduct, or Colton generously conducts another survey where we're at this maximum water level, we can then have a comparison point. So I think what we're doing right now is compiling the data. We have our water level reports right now. In the future, if this does seem to be a persisting issue or complaints or whatever, I suppose, or at least a updated data point, we can at least have a baseline off of that based on this year's survey. So short term right now, navigability is accessible. It's accessible to Rock Lake proper. Arthur was able to kayak through the mill pond. I would say it's, I don't know if you would agree, but it's not as easy as kayaking on open, clear water, but it is paddleable.
I was observing some people, some stand-up paddleboarders, some kayakers, some small boats there, I think last weekend. And do we have any recommendation for people, if they're using their paddles, it's really not affecting anything? And as long as their propeller is not down in the muck, it's not really affecting things. Do we have any recommendations that people do not use poles to get through the vegetation? You know, where they're actually getting into the muck and churning it up?
I don't think that the warden would ever enforce that. You'd be restricting a user of the lake. Bass fishermen use poles to push into areas. I don't see enforcement on that.
I've been with wardens who have themselves gotten stuck and they've been troubled. So, I mean, it does happen. And I would just say overall, I mean, the department, it seems like we're completely in alignment in the sense that yes, there's environmental concerns. We also want to have more recreational use, whether that's fishing, boating, anything like that. So I appreciate the question, but yeah, I can't see that being a problem.
And I think I know the impetus of this, right? I mean, I've been at the joint Rock Lake committee meetings with 70 people in them. When the water's down 14 to 16 inches from the normal summer levels, you get people that are beating down your door. This year, that's not an issue, right? You take a look at these, and this is, we're at the summer maximum right now. Summer minimum, it's not, it's what, 827, or is it 26 point something?
It's just a few inches. It's
Okay.
not very much.
So, you take away 2 feet of water, or a foot and a half feet of water from some of these numbers, you're gonna see issues. You can't predict Mother Nature. I mean, that was kind of what we said in those meetings, right, is we need rain. Well, we got the rain this year, and the issues have kind of went away. That's plain and simple. Everybody's gonna be beating down your door to dredge when the water's low, and everybody's gonna be complaining about shoreline erosion when the water's high. So, I think that's kind of the impetus of what happened here. If it was me, I can't make any recommendations. I don't see a need to dredge. I wouldn't spend the money, I guess, personally.
Can I just confirm with you though that, and I don't emphasize this, that mill pond, besides the frogs and that, I mean, what people like to do is fish, it is a significant fishery, so any amount of dredging will most likely adversely affect the fishery of the lake. Is that a fair statement?
So I'm not the fisheries biologist.
Neither am I.
I just want to make that clear for the tape. Mark, you're the man. Anytime you run that harvester, you're gonna have some take of those young of the year small fish. That's just gonna happen. That's part of the name of the game with those harvesters. They drive through. You're gonna have tadpoles on the harvester, and you can't remove them all. Some of them will get mushed out. Will it impact the fishery as a whole? Will it impact the frog population as a whole? Numbers-wise, I would say that's unlikely, depending on the scale. Now, if you took, would it impact the fishery as a whole? I would say it's probably unlikely from a water quality point of view. Would it have some impact? Potentially. But many of those fish are young of the year fish, and that is like a nursery area for those bass and bluegills in that area, and obviously the frogs. I mean, there are probably more tadpoles that I saw there than anywhere else besides, say, a couple little ponds by my house. So there's a lot of them there, and they're hanging out in the vegetation. They're clinging to the vegetation. So there will be take of those species with a harvester, very likely. 100%. I won't say likely.
If I could tag in on that just briefly, I'm also not a fisheries biologist, but I did ask Mark, the person that Arthur's referencing is a wealth of fisheries knowledge in the area, and I asked him point blank, is this idea of dredging potentially like a 50-foot wide channel in this mill pond, is that just a no for the department, just something that we couldn't entertain? His answer was no, it's not an immediate no, right? We could, what I gathered is that there could be some negotiating, right, with regard to the width, with regard to, where exactly that channel is, things like that. He did mention that it's a very valuable area for centrarchids, that'd be sunfish, bluegills, things of that nature. So it is a valuable fish area, but I take that to be, when I ask someone from fisheries if it's just a no, and they come back with it's not, that means to me that we see value in balancing those interests, right? The environmental and, the recreational.
Can I ask a question? I just wanted to make sure I understood. So Arthur, you were talking about it's possible for people to get individual permits to do some hand pulling, and did I understand like up to 30 feet from their pier? Could you just reiterate that? Because we did have some feedback from a resident, which is probably the person you're referring to, that it was a fairly easy process to get that permit. So could you just speak a little bit more to that, please?
Absolutely. So it's a NR, it's in the code, NR 109. You would need to apply for a mechanical harvesting permit. Generally, these are exemptions for most residents. However, this is an area in a sensitive area, so the exemption does not fall to them. It requires a permit to pull. Basically, so people can't cut these desirable species willy-nilly. It gets a little bit of oversight for me. That essentially, they would apply for this permit. It would be routed through our intake, and I would have up to 15 business days to approve or deny it. I would say it's pretty unlikely that I would deny a small hand removal project to provide access around piers. I think when you get 15 people all in one area, that's when it becomes more of an issue. But that's something I'm open to. People hand remove all the time, so it's a relatively painless process, I guess, to answer your question.
And also, you made a comment to Eric that if the city wanted to do some hand pulling to open up fishing for the people that are by the VA part, we could, as a city, could request that.
Absolutely, it would just require getting a hand removal permit, which is fairly painless. It's a little bit laborious. I don't want to talk for Eric, but it's a little bit laborious. But I mean, considering the volume of water lilies and the actual volume of plants, it would probably be variable depending on what goes over the outlet and stacks up in that area. It did look like there was a lot more mass of vegetation, mostly coontail, which can mat up. It's a free-floating plant, so wherever the wind blows it, it's probably going to go. It did seem like that stacked up by the outlet. So he's gonna get a good pump on his arms when he's going out and scooping that stuff out, so.
You're assuming it's me doing it. As much as I'd like to, it's nice to go outside sometimes. But maybe to clarify a little bit, the city on that public property portion, we would be treated as a property owner or riparian owner, just like those private residences on the north side would. So we would have the same permitting process that those residents would have.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing that up too, Arthur. That I'm going to say the prevailing winds are from the west-southwest. So the fact that the weeds and that are floating up to that end is just normal. And so that is something though, if someone was so inclined, be it the city or a property owner, they could pick those severed pieces of vegetation up and put them on the shore or put them in a garbage can, or is that okay?
Yeah, with the permit, you'd have to have some level of disposal. Generally, it'd be, thrown in the trash. Bigger operations, they have disposal sites that are required,
Right.
Things along those lines.
What I'm trying to do is for the people that own property there, the people that use this, if they can, citizen wants to take that coontails and put them in their, back of their truck, they can do that, right?
Yep, or compost in the garden, or just has to be upland, can't throw it back in the water. And then you'll be interfering with your neighbor then, and it's illegal in the code.
Right. So thank you. Questions, other comments? I'm going back to our agenda, which is finalized recommendation on next steps regarding fulfilling the resolution, and we've got short-term, long-term. For right now, number one, which is the 50-foot launch to bridge channel, and that's 50-foot wide, dredged to what, 4 feet was it? Was one option, and the other options were the ones that we talked about, harvesting, we talked about hand pulling, we talked about permitting, or some other options. Any ones that anybody else wants to comment on? Okay.
I guess I'm kind of in agreement with you that as far as short term, I think with all the information we've gotten from our guests today and Patricia and Colton over the last couple of months, I mean, a couple of months ago, we were leaning the direction of dredging the whole up pond. So I know we've jumped around here a lot. So thank you for all the information. I think we can take, or I'd advocate for taking dredging and any harvesting off the table for short and long, or at least short-term recommendations. I do want to add that maybe included in long-term recommendations that if there are proposed improvements down the road to the Ferry Street Bridge, then maybe recommend further consideration of boat launch improvements and the possibility of considering dredging a channel again at that point. At this point, if we dredged a deeper channel so bigger boats could use that boat launch, it doesn't matter because they're not going to be able to get through that Ferry Street Drive bridge. So I think it still is worth noting that we should, at least City Council or the Parks Board, if there is considerations for modifications to the Ferry Street Bridge, that maybe at that point we have another discussion.
So just to clarify, McCray, if I may, the triggering of basically our future developments or long-term developments would be subject to further discussions on Ferry Drive Bridge. So whether that's at the Public Works Board level, whether at the City Council level, wherever that would be basically our triggering point to see what we want to do in the future. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I agree with both of you on the perspective of essentially doing nothing except. I still would like to talk about, are there any improvements on the little fishing piers, pulling the weeds aside or pulling the vegetation out aside, are there any improvements? Could there be the possibility of another pedestrian bridge or bridge of some sort on the other side of the road? Because there's an open channel with open water. There was a huge fish that was cruising through there the other day, and I thought it would be really kind of neat if there's more access for fishing that's not with the pier or the footings in the mill pond itself, but if there's opportunity for us to figure out a way to increase that with an investment, smaller investment. I know, Erica, you had shared some prior experience with some other types of things for kayaks and whatnot, but is there something on the fishing or other avenue that we should consider for short term?
You mean between the lake and the bridge, that what you're talking about?
Yeah, between the bridge and between the South Ferry and the mill pond, like adding a second pedestrian
okay.
bridge on the other side of the road. I'm just brainstorming a little, because there's only the pedestrian bridge on the west
Yes.
side. There isn't a pedestrian bridge on the east side.
It's pretty wide, just,
No, people stand on the bridge and fish, there's no pedestrian.
If I could,
You know what I'm saying, I'm just brainstorming like, ideas to add additional fishing for people. Because the pedestrian bridge on the west side, there are a lot of people on there often, but could we add one on the east side, just to give more places for people to fish, as an improvement in the getting, Tim focused on the words, best and highest use. To get higher use, you have higher amount of space available for people to access the lake. So I was just thinking maybe we could add some ideas like that into our proposal.
Yep, I do specifically had some notes jotted down for like smaller scale projects, ideas for improving access. But Tim, do we want to, before we move on to those things, do we want to officially vote on removal of options, or what our, I guess, a large scale option is for the mill pond?
My perception is yes, because I would like to move us to something based on the information we have. Aaron is at the mic, and I'm going to say, please,
that's okay, I turned it off for a moment.
no, please share with your perception or your comment.
I appreciate that, that question, Mary, right?
Yes.
Yes, I wrote down your name, and I wrote down, I was going to try to sneak that into conversation somewhere, because I know you mentioned that earlier. Yes, the short answer is yes. And I'm not sure exactly what sort of an improvement might interest the board the most, but, you know, certainly we could talk about another pedestrian bridge. We could talk about another sort of maybe kayak launch or fishing pier, or, you know, even, I see wetland, I don't have parcel boundaries in front of me, you know, boardwalk. I'm totally open to engaging with you guys further on what some of those improvements could look like. And I would also be the person who would issue those permits as well. So, yeah, definitely, that's exciting.
So thank you, Aaron, thank you, Mary. Just for clarity, and I'm looking at the map, and for location, I am looking at where the ferry, the car bridge, the auto bridge, there's 2.5 is the depth, and above that 2.5, which is on the north side of the channel, there is a fishing pier, or an access pier. And so, as part of this conversation, long-term or such, that could either be expanded or made more accessible by a pedestrian bridge or such. So from what I'm hearing, and our options and use and fishing and kayaking and access, I think those are two places we could concentrate on that location and go from there. Any questions, comments on that? So with that, I guess two things. One, would that, what I just said, would that be a long-term idea, or would that, as a parks board, would that be a short-term request? So that if we're not dredging and we're not harvesting, we would have some monies that would go to, one, increasing the, maybe the size, the length, width of that fishing pier, which is on the southwest part of the pond, and maybe put it into a budget about a pedestrian bridge, as Mary and Aaron have said, that would be on the other side, that would go from the parking to the south edge and then maybe over to the sidewalk.
Excuse me, Tim, you said southwest, did you mean where the current fishing bridge is right off of the park, isn't that isn't that this one right here? So that would be to the north?
That would, my math, I'm looking at the north arrow, and so that would be southwest, if I
I'm talking
misspoke.
vis-a-vis the channel, but it's north of the channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it says 2.5, and just above the 2.5, there is a fishing
Okay.
Yeah.
deal.
And if I may ask a clarifying question, or maybe this puts it into perspective a little bit, we need to define, or at least be aware what short-term and long-term really is and differentiate those two things. I mean, short-term will not be 2024. It will be, short-term will not be this calendar year.
Right.
So if, at least the way that I look at it, when we're developing our capital improvement projects, I know for here, we would have surface water, potential surface water recreational grants available as well for something like this. So it would include, for one, permitting process, 2, grant applications, 3, budgetary requests, and then 4, budgetary approvals. So we're looking at 2-ish years. I would still consider 2 years to be relatively short-term when it comes to budgetary concerns. Looking at long-term, I would say that would be like that 2 to 10-year time frame would be like a long-term portion. That's at least how I would perceive it. I just want to make sure that when we're delineating short-term goals, it would not be in 2024.
Thank you for the clarification, Eric. I would agree. I would think that for budgetary purposes, when I say short-term, I'm talking within 2 fiscal years. And then long-term would be beyond that. So if we are in agreement, at least for our purposes, tonight, we as a board are going to recommend that as presented, word status quo, meaning no dredging and no cutting. That's medium. For adding to the short term, we would look at pedestrian bridge and increasing the pier that's on that, by the canal. And maybe for something immediacy, we could have Eric get some scuba divers out there and get some weeds pulled off the veterans fishing area, just to see what kind of response we get for fishing people.
With a permit.
Yeah.
That'd be part of the recommendation, pursue the permit for that.
The way that I see this is, now that you guys have kind of formalized what your general consensus is, or what your direction is, I would say the next following Parks Board meeting would be finalizing your true actual recommendation. But for right now, geez, I don't know where I actually was going on that tangent there. I apologize. It's been a day. But the way that I look at it, I suppose you could keep it a little bit more broad, saying a long-term goal would be, a short-term goal would be doing what we can with what we have existing to increase recreational opportunities. So that would be, weed harvesting would be a short-term recreational improvement. And then as we go through the next 2 fiscal years, research what we can do for recreational improvement, like you said, potential boardwalk installation or kayak or fishing pier installation. So you could just say improve general recreational opportunities.
Thank you for the clarification. And just to be clear, I'm talking about hand pulling. I'm not, I'm not talking any mechanical harvesters or any of that. It'd be just where we could have it and go out to the 20 feet or whatever would be appropriate. You can get your Zepco 202 out there and your bobber and you're all set. All right. So, given that, I'm going to put it to our colleagues to maybe form a better motion that we.
Yeah, before we do we need to, I really appreciate our experts. I'm wondering if we need to keep them here any longer. I mean, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful example of public service to make expertise available to me. I'm absolutely sincere about that. You guys come from the way, so I don't want to hold any longer than, so I'm just bringing that up.
Well, thank you, and I'll put it to that. Arthur's got an hour to try to get back in his life, so we don't want to spend any more time here if he doesn't want to.
That's all right, I got no legs, so.
Okay.
But you have a lot of expertise, so that's a benefit to all of us. Erin,
answer, I'm good.
Oh, okay, great, okay.
And Colton?
I'm good too, I don't have a bike either, so.
Well, maybe you and Arthur could talk. Maybe Aaron could coach you.
You guys know what we do for a career, this is our life.
Yes, welcome to public service, right? So thank you. So does that get at your need, Mike? Thank you for bringing that up.
Very anxious, not mine.
I understand, but thank you for your empathy and concern, it's quite impressive. So going back to this, are we ready to create a proposal that to be approved? Yes.
I will so motion to remove dredging and weed harvesting, or mechanical weed harvesting from consideration, and go back to the option of, I guess, do nothing. Yeah. I don't know if that's the best way to word that, or if there's any recommendations for revising that motion.
You could just say formalizing a recommendation to city council. You could just say that as well. So what you're gonna be doing is you're gonna be putting the details, so you're not just saying do nothing, but you're gonna be formalizing a recommendation to city council. I would say note that in the motion.
I guess outside of the motion, maybe, I'm just thinking kind of over the next couple months here. It sounds like we're gonna vote here on most likely not pursuing dredging or weed harvesting. We still have to develop our recommendations for short-term improvements for recreational access. And I'm assuming we're not gonna have that done tonight. I guess I would personally like to ponder on that a little bit more, what options there are. So I don't know if we want to, whatever we end up voting here, if we want to update city council with the fact, I mean, that's kind of the big issue is, are we dredging or are we not dredging? I think it might be worth just letting city council know that we voted on, removing those options.
I guess what I was wondering if we could do, because I think that's very important, but then maybe say, add the comment or whatever that, and explore, something like and explore, I don't know, something like explore options for future improvements for fishing and possible pedestrian bridge access or something. I think we want to kind of say and explore, this other, because otherwise it puts a little bit of a closure to it. So I don't know how we would want to word that.
I think we could say we're removing dredging and mechanical harvesting of vegetation and I guess considering recreational enhancements
That's good.
to the
So if I'm understanding this, and I think what we want to do is this point, let's create a agreement that we as a board are recommending that dredging and or mechanical removal of vegetation is off the table. So that's one that we will propose.
That's the
and
motion.
That will be the motion. The second one, we will create a motion to explore short-term options and recommendations at the next meeting. And then after that, then we can, at the next meeting, we can explore long-term things. So we're getting at the needs of the city, but also our immediate needs.
So you amended the motion, basically.
Yes, so at this point, I think the motion is that we are recommending to the city council that dredging of any type and mechanical removal of any vegetation are both off. We are not recommending either of those options.
Yes, for the short term.
So, is it?
But you also amended to say that we would recommend that we will explore enhancing recreational opportunities through less invasive means.
So what, just to be clear, I wanted to stop with the one, that our recommendation is no dredging,
Okay.
no mechanical. We'll vote on that.
Good.
Then the second motion we'll
Let's vote
have
on that
is
first, then.
Yep, so the second motion will be, we will then meet and create some short-term options, and we can ask Eric and others to give us some ideas of money if we're talking about pedestrian bridges and expanding things like that. So but let's do the first one, which is saying,
I'll second that motion.
well, let's make sure we have it. So, the motion is, we're taking dredging and mechanical harvesting off our recommendation.
Made by McCray, seconded by me.
All right, so, do we have a vote? Mary?
Yes, or aye.
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 All right, thank you. So motion is passed to take the dredging and mechanical removal off for our recommendations.
The wheels of democracy.
Sure. So now thank you. So the second thing now is, are we creating a motion to explore the needs of the mill pond for best and highest use to meet the needs, both short-term and long-term? So right now, we're going to do that, but next meeting, we're going to explore short-term. Short-term meaning within the next 2 years. And costs and options.
Do we
I don't
need
think
a
we need a
motion?
motion. We don't need a motion, I just think we add that to our agenda. It's our
All right.
next set of action items to work on.
Okay?
And when we have a pool of options that we want to make a decision on, we motion which ones we want to bring forward to our recommendation
Very good.
portfolio.
Yep, so
I
that's
think that
our-
just becomes our agenda.
So we'll add that to the agenda. So that will be one of the things we're adding to the agenda is our short-term options. And if I could ask Eric, as part of that, you could give us some maybe cost estimates, timelines, things like that, including somebody hand-pulling things off the,
Who here on the board is retirees?
We were on the board, what?
Who's a
Are
retiree?
retirees?
Oh, my
Who's a
bad.
retiree?
We can amass a Parks Board volunteer staff.
as long as we have insurance from the city, we can talk about that, but thank you for that. So is people good with that?
Yes.
All right, so that's what we'll do, we'll add that to the agenda, we'll, at the future items of short-term specifically. Yes,
One quick item, Mary, you're our city council liaison,
Yes.
right? Is it worth, I'm not sure when the next meeting is, just because that's kind of a big thing we just voted on, is that worth just a verbal announcement, or I guess letting the city council know that's where we're sitting right now? Or should we wait until we have our final recommendation?
We have a meeting on Tuesday of next week.
Yeah, so we've passed the point, or we will pass the point this week, basically, and have that updated to the next city council meeting. We can perhaps put it in the director's report or city manager's report maybe, would that be appropriate? Otherwise, it would basically be when the next March board meetings or meeting minutes are accepted at the city council.
so do we get an answer?
So I guess, is there a preference here of just, I don't know if it's something you could just bring up at the next city council meeting, whether it's,
I think it's a little bit too, I think, an interest of ensuring that the city council knows we're making progress, is what the objective would be.
Yeah.
And I can work with Drake or Eric on making sure it's in the right place, either through the director's report, or if I have a chance to make a comment, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Represent our work.
Tim, are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay with that.
Okay.
So thank you. Given what we have just done, are we ready to move to item 8, public comments, including emails? So any public comments? I did have one, and I pointed out, someone was concerned about the calorie pear that was in front of the building, that it had rotted, root flare, and I was told that all calorie pears in the city are going to be...
The ones on City Hall here that are compromised will be removed. I mean,
What repair?
calorie,
Ornamental pears.
calories of Rita pears or genus of pear trees. I wouldn't go as far as to say that, Tim, we're not actively pursuing calorie pears to remove if they're thriving and healthy. Ones that are compromised structurally or health-wise will be removed. The instance that's here in front of City Hall will be removed. It is declining in health, it is structurally unsound, and will be removed as well.
Thank you.
So we will not remove trees unless they're dead, diseased, or dying, or pose a public health safety concern.
Thank you. The other public comment I had is The people liked the fact that there was signage for kayak rental down at Sandy Beach. They thought they looked like they were yard sale signs, so their comment was, is there a way they could make them more either permanent looking, or is that in the plan?
I would say no, just on the reason that that is an annual contract with that specific contractor. I wouldn't pursue something substantial until we know what's actually going on for further developments at Sandy Beach. Since that is an annual contract, that contractor does have the likelihood of changing on an annual basis. So I actually would not be in favor of more substantial signage that is contractor specific.
Okay, thank you.
As far as public comments, we got the email, which we kind of talked about earlier, from Sean, who was submitted emails to us about the Mill Pond previously. I don't know if we need to discuss that more, if we kind of discussed it previously.
I would say no.
Okay.
When I was registering voters yesterday, a woman unbidden brought up her concern about Sandy Beach and how her daughter doesn't want to take her children there because of unsavory characters who lurk about. And I think that's sort of, we brought up in the previous meeting, but I thought that was in the evening, and she was saying, no, it was during the day. I'm reporting what was told to me, I have no idea if it's true. And second, that they didn't like the number of dogs that were running over the beach in Sandy Beach. So that's the only comments I have to relay.
So enforcement does come down to the police department at Lake Mills. We do have those CSOs. I'm not sure what the CSO schedules are, just so we describe acronyms. CSO is Community Service Officer. I'm not sure if they have limited shifts. I do know that the amount of tickets that are being issued at Sandy Beach and all of the beaches has substantially increased, so I do know that it is being enforced. Perhaps the amount of visitation has also increased, but those are Parks Department staff employees, so I'm not quite sure what their schedules are.
Are you talking about the dogs or?
Dogs in general on the beaches are not allowed. So dogs are not allowed on Sandy and Barnes Beach, and that is one of the aspects that's enforced by the community service officers. But I do know for sure that there are more citations being issued at the beaches in years past because of CSOs patrolling the parks.
She also decried the lack of adult supervision of 12 and 14-year-olds or whomever who are working at the gatehouse. And I said, well, that may simply be a matter of personnel. I only relay that. I don't expect a solution.
So we do have various age people at the gatehouse. We do intentionally staff that, and we limit their roles and responsibilities, and that's why we have staff from the police department down there as well. If people are, the role and responsibilities of the gatehouse staff is purely to be a park greeter, to inform people of rules and regulations, and basically to collect entrance fees for Sandy Beach. That is beyond, anything else is beyond the capacity of their position. They are all of legal working age.
They've all are.
Of legal working age, that I should
She was
guarantee.
quite confident of that as well.
So thank you. Any other public comments, including emails? Nothing to add? All right, if nothing to add, we're moving to 9 recommendations for future agendas. One is, as we just talked about, we're looking at exploring, moving on with the recommendations as for the city council, both for short-term and long-term for the Mill Pond. That's going to be added to the agenda. Any other items on the agenda?
Yes, Tim. For the donation acceptance policy, I do need Parks Board recommendation and city council approval to actually accept the donation. A donation suggestion has been brought to me. A resident brought forward that they would like to donate permanent bike racks in some of our parks. However, we have already purchased those and have planned to install those bike racks in the parks, both at Bartles and Walls Park already. However, this resident, when I informed her of that, is willing to sponsor the costs associated for the project. So since we already had it in progress, she wasn't aware of that, but I still would like to do an official donation application for it. So it'll basically be a, by default, we just have to get it passed through Parks Board and City Council. But it is in recognition of her son, who was passed away when he was a very avid biker. My recommendation recommendations to install the bike racks for Wallace and Bartles because they do not have them. She concurred, saying that there would be very adequate spots for those permanent bike racks.
I think that will be added. Anything else for agenda items? If not,
Next meeting, Tim, we can come up with that.
so the next meeting I have is on Monday, September 9th in this building. So Monday, September 9th, 5:30. That concur with others? Our guests are welcome to attend. You're lifeless people, you know, we're funsters here.
I'll be out of town.
Good thinking.
Yes, we're going to our second Monday, which we agreed to. Yeah, yes, so the second Monday going forward in this room. Yes, so thank you for the clarification. Anything else? If not, the meeting is adjourned at 7:33. So thank you all.
You have to bang the gravel.